and public. I'd like to open up the roll call and go through the process by which people participate again, if we could.
We'll now be taking roll call, starting with Baboulian.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Cermak.
Here.
Thank you. Clifford.
Here.
Thank you. Farah.
Present.
Thank you. Heidelback.
Here.
Thank you. Harada.
Here.
Thank you. Huffman. Lynch.
Here.
Thank you. Nevdal.
Here.
Thank you. Peck.
Here.
Thank you. Ron.
I'm here.
Thank you. Stevenson.
Here.
Thank you. Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Wu.
Here.
Thank you. You.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is established.
Fantastic. Moderator, would you like to go through the process for people being able to participate?
Yes, please. So before we get started, I would like to remind board members and senior staff who are not speaking to mute your microphones. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief friendly reminder or simply mute your microphone. To facilitate the public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the committee chair reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. At the committee's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the Q&A feature. I will announce that members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by clicking on the icon with the question mark within the square located at the bottom center of the WebEx screen. The instructions will be displayed each time on the screen for your reference. In the ask field, you will put, "I would like to make a public comment," and send to all panelists. All other submissions will be dismissed. We will also not be utilizing the hand raise feature, although you will have access to it. So if you are a member of the public today, please do not utilize the hand raise feature as you will not be called upon. Should you not have access to the Q&A feature, you do have the ability to send a chat request to the host to make that public comment, and you will be put into the queue. Again, priority is going to go to individuals utilizing the public comment question and answer method. Thank you.
Good morning again. I think we had a committee member join us again. Could we catch the roll for that committee member? Committee member Huffman, can you please, I see that you've shared. Oh, good morning, Alice.
Good morning. How are you?
You know, terrific. Terrific. So let me start with focusing on where we ended yesterday. We had public comment on agenda item 9A. And if I recall, we did not have a motion. And we were getting ready to do, I think, the B section, if I'm not mistaken, agenda number 9. So, agenda item 9B had to do with classification of manufactured cannabis goods. We read through that yesterday. Do committee members have any comments on the recommended language that was provided and the information that talked about how they're different, the different examples that were used in describing manufactured cannabis goods?
If any committee members have any additional comments they would like to make, please raise your hand. And may I please remind committee members that we do have a court reporter here who is trying to capture the notes of the meeting. So if you could please make sure you are speaking clearly, close to your mic, and make sure you announce your name when you are called on.
Member Farrow, this is Christina Dempsey from CDPH. Do you mind if I frame the question for the committee?
I would be happy to have you frame the question, and it might also include, we might consider rereading the recommendations so that way other folks on the public understand that may not have been with us yesterday what we're discussing.
Sure. So let me just frame the question on the product classification side. So the question that we're asking of the committee is really, do the existing product classifications make sense for the products that are in the marketplace? Are they the right product classifications that we should have? So the existing product classifications are, there are non-manufactured products like flower and flower-only pre-rolls. And then within manufactured products, there are cannabis concentrates, there are edible cannabis products, and topical cannabis products. And various requirements are tied back to those requirements. So how a product is classified is important. So the question that we would like to pose to you is, are those the right product classifications, or should we consider a different type of product classification? And the example that we've shared is a product classification that would be based on method of consumption. The advantage to the existing product classifications is that they are simple, but they are based on the sort of the nature of the product itself. Basing product classifications on the method of consumption would allow a more risk-based approach to setting requirements. So as we've sort of stated in our consideration section, having a product that you inhale has different risks for the body than having a product that you rub on the skin, and having a product that you ingest has different risks than others. So having product classifications based on method of consumption would allow more thought into those, but it does create just a different schedule for the way to think about product classifications.
Very good. Are there any questions? It looks like Committee Member Wu has his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. Committee member Wu speaking. Not a question, but more a comment that, I'm supportive of, reconsidering or looking at by a kind of ingestion method. I've always thought it makes more sense. The only thing I would recommend that, BCC and the agencies think about is how do you handle products where potentially you can use it, in multiple ways. Something like, suppose, cannabis oil that, potentially could be taken differently. And as a result, if there's any risks tied to one form of ingestion, you probably then have to defer to the more conservative classification, I guess. But it's just something to think about.
Thank you, Committee Member Wu. Committee Member Nicole, I saw your hand raised. Did you want to make a comment?
No, I was going to largely ask the same question or pose the same scenario as Committee Member Wu.
Very good. Is there anybody else on the committee that would like to make any comments based upon this particular item of the agenda? Seeing none, can we open this up to public comment? Oh, excuse me. Committee Member Cermak has raised his hand. Committee Member Cermak.
When you said this item on the agenda, I didn't know if you meant just Part A or Part B. So were you restricting that to one or the other? The reason I'm asking this is because I have a motion that I want to make regarding Part A. And And that should be made, I think, before we go on to public comment.
I was going to try to do both part A and B, but if you have a motion to item A, I would need to get clarification if we could step back into the comments we had about A and then get a motion. So we're fine with that. Very good. So let's, if you feel that you're ready to make a recommendation on item A, Committee Member Cermak, please do.
Yes, this is Tim Cermak, and I move the CAC recommend inhaled products, including vape cartridges, dab, shatter, wax, and pre-rolls, can contain only cannabis, cannabis oils, and cannabis oils, and other ingredients from the harvested plant deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA. Terpenes not part of the harvested plant and flavorings other than those inherent in the harvested plant are not permitted in inhaled or combustible products.
Committee Member Cermak, can you please repeat that and go a little slower, please? We're trying to catch that.
Okay, surely. I've got it written down so I can do it just the way I said it. I move the CAC recommend inhaled products, including vape cartridges, dab, shatter, wax, and pre-rolls, can contain only cannabis, cannabis oils, and other ingredients from the harvested plant deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA. Terpenes not part of the harvested plant and flavorings other than those inherent in the harvested plant are not permitted in inhaled or combustible products.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Lynch, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, Committee Member Lynch, I'd like to second that recommendation.
Just 1 second. This is a court reporter. I'm so sorry. Something is cutting out, just like, and I just missed like one word now and then, but I can't get it replaced. Is there anything going on is anybody not muted? Thank
This
you.
is the moderator. I have muted everybody.
Thank you.
Did you miss the words from Committee Member Cermak, or did you miss the second from Committee Member Lynch?
Only from Lynch, Committee Member Lynch. I'm sorry, I got everything, but I did not hear the moderator nor Ms. Lynch.
Okay, I'll hang up and we'll have the Committee Member Lynch open her mic and then make her second.
Thank you. This is Committee Member Lynch. I'd like to second Cermak's motion.
Thank you, Committee Member Lynch. We have a motion and a second. I'd like to open up that for first, since we have a motion, any comment from our committee members to that? Committee Member Nevedal?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So the motion itself references the harvested plant. So would that mean essentially that the recommendation, if adopted, would allow for any cannabis derivatives to be added back into cannabis products? And how would hemp be treated? My apologies. How would hemp be treated once regulated and allowed to commingle? Would this also include hemp, or would there have to be specific, like, is it cannabis species specific or cannabis supply chain specific? I'm just don't want it to be batch specific, I guess, is my concern. So is it the intention of the motion that if I have batch 1 of cannabis, I extract it, the terpenes are separated off, that I can only put batch 1's terpenes back into the product as flavoring, or can I source terpenes and flavorings from other batches of the cannabis supply chain? I just was hoping for a little clarification. I know that's a lot of minutia, my apologies, but so I'll pause there.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdal. Committee Member Bubulian, your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, on this one, I would strongly recommend against a motion like this. There's a couple of things to take into consideration. When we talk about only going with FDA-approved ingredients, the FDA doesn't even recognize cannabis as a whole plant, let alone any of its ingredients. When we talk about terpenes, if you were to smoke the flower version of cannabis, you're getting all the terpenes anyway. So for the concentrated products, that becomes irrelevant and just becomes overreaching. On the other side of it, when you look at all the different terpenes and all the different ingredients that are used in traditional production, non-cannabis related, all these are deemed safe. There's never been an issue. Yesterday, we had a couple of comments about the vaping crisis and all that. I want to remind everybody that during the vaping crisis, none of that was tied back to any of the legal dispensaries. And with the legal dispensaries, everything goes through laboratory testing anyway. So if something is deemed not safe, it's not passing.
Yep. I'm sorry, this is a court reporter, and I'm still having just total cutouts, and I'm pretty sure it's not on my end because I'm using a phone. So I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Okay, where would you like me to restart from?
All right, you were talking about, I want to remind everybody during the vaping crisis, none of that was, and then it cut out.
So during the vaping crisis, none of those products were tied back to a legal dispensary. That means none of the products that caused any of the damage and the harm were from the regulated supply chain. And that tells you something. After 3 years, we haven't had a single issue of any of these products being tied back after laboratory testing, being tied back to any sort of harm done to the public. When you go back to the beginning of time, we haven't had a single death associated with cannabis. So a lot of this stuff, I just want to recommend that not to come out with recommendations as a knee-jerk reaction to something that happened in the past without really truly understanding what the situation is. If we start limiting terpenes and ingredients like this, we're really basically saying the only type of vaporizer is going to be a distillate or a isolate where it's strictly at THC, and that does knock out a lot of products. In cannabis, you have the entourage effect. The terpenes play a big role in all this stuff. So really, yeah, I'd like to hear a public comment on this before we're revisiting.
This is a court reporter. I don't know what's wrong, and it's just not the same as it was yesterday. There's just a lot of cutout. I think I got what he wanted, but there are like words that are missing. I'm sorry.
This is the moderator, and I have a feeling it is your connection, as it is coming across very clear without interruptions to myself and the rest of the panel. I can ask the chair one of two things: that either we proceed and have her do the interjections, or we take a brief pause so that way she can disconnect and try to reconnect with a better connection.
Great minds think alike. Can we take a 10-minute to start? And if it looks like we'll need more than 10 minutes to correct the connection, we do so. It's very important that we have a court reporter that can capture the conversation. So this moment, we're going to take a brief 10-minute break with the hope of getting a better connection for our court reporter.
Thank you.
I believe we've reconnected and are ready to start again. Is that correct, moderator?
Correct.
Court reporter
says yes too. Thank you so much. Right.
Very good. Very good. So I think Mr. Babulian was talking at the time. Is that correct? Babulian, had you completed your comments? First of all, we should probably take roll and have with a show of hands. everybody show that they're back because we are reconvening. People might have stepped away. So a show of hands from our committee members. Could you please raise your hand if you have returned? Excuse me, I was muted to try to avoid anything, but Committee Member Wu, I know you were here. Could you re-raise your hand if you're present? Committee Member,
Sorry.
That's all right. Committee Member Baboulian, could you raise your hand if you've returned? Committee Member Peck, if you are returned, could you raise your hand? Thank you, Committee Member Ron. If we have a quorum, we can begin. Do we have a quorum?
We do. Thank you, members. You can lower your hands now. And let me just remind members that, yes, we do. Once again, we have the court reporter here who is transcribing the meeting. So please, when you are making your comments, please speak clearly and slowly. And make sure that you are limiting all background noise when you unmute yourselves.
Thank you very much, Kayla. I believe we were in the process of receiving comments from Committee Member Baboulian at the time we took our break. Committee Member Baboulian, are you ready to continue your comments?
Yes, sir. Should I start from the beginning or continue?
Well, if you know where you were and it's consistent with where our recording and court reporter is, you can start from where you were. If you're more comfortable starting from the beginning, please do that. But could you do us a favor and speak slowly? I do it myself. I tend to know the issues, so I speak as if everybody understands. So if you can go slowly, that'd be great.
Sure. I think I was already done with most of it, but it's really one of those things where with the vaping crisis, the main culprit of that was vitamin E accelerant. None of it was tied back to the legal cannabis industry, and to punish the legal operators, the operators that are producing quality products, just because of some bad actors. I think the focus should be more on how do you do away with the illegal operations and the illegal products and the stuff that's not laboratory tested, that come up with restrictions on products without much information on it. And again, when we talk about the FDA and what they recognize as approved and not approved, the FDA doesn't even recognize cannabis. So to even talk about the terpenes and other derivatives of cannabis as it relates to the FDA right now, we're just not there yet.
Thank you, Committee Member Baboulian. Committee Member Huffman, I see that your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself and lower your hand if you'd like to make a comment. Committee Member Huffman, are you wishing to make a comment?
No, I don't want to make a comment. I'm just trying to get my hand down.
Okay. So it will be at the bottom right corner of your screen in the participant panel. And while she's doing that, Committee Member Cermak, you have your hand raised. Would you like to make your comment? Go ahead and lower your hand and unmute yourself.
Yes, I would like to make a comment. The purpose of this is also to be more in line with what the Department of Public Health is doing regarding not permitting the kind of flavorings and modifications that the tobacco industry has done, which is both a health concern and a concern in terms of permitting products to be increasingly attractive or made increasingly attractive to adolescents. So I would like actually to suggest a modification in order to take into consideration both what Bobolyan and Nebadol have raised as issues. I think it is the FDA has looked at certain terpenes such as pyrene and shown that it can be harmful. And so the modification, I think, takes that I'm going to suggest takes these considerations or these concerns into consideration. So it would be the following wording. It would be that I move the CAC recommend inhaled products, including vape cartridges, dab, shatter, wax, and pre-rolls, can contain only cannabis, cannabis oils, and other ingredients from harvested cannabis plants, unless deemed unsafe for inhalation by the FDA. Terpenes not part of harvested cannabis plants and flavorings other than those inherent in harvested cannabis plants are not permitted in inhalants or combustible products. I think that answers Nebadol's question about does it have to be from the same batch or the same plant, and it just restricts cannabis products to being things that come from inherent in cannabis plants in general.
Committee Member Cermak, can we have you repeat the second half of your modified comment, starting with the terpenes not harvested?
Terpenes not part of harvested cannabis plants and flavorings other than those inherent in harvested cannabis plants are not permitted in inhaled and combustible products.
Thank you, Dr. Cermak.
Yes.
Committee Member Wu, you had your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and lower your hand if you'd like to comment.
Thank you. I just want to kind of reiterate I just want to support, Bobolyan's comments. I do appreciate, Cermak's focus on public safety, public health. I think, if we don't want products to be, made more attractive to children, which I think we all unanimously support, there's probably better ways to get there than through this. I do think this is a little overreaching and may prohibit manufacturers. There's probably going to be unintended consequences, I think, both on their ability to make products as well as, I think, from a regulatory side enforcement, it probably makes things more difficult as well. I'd also say, keep in mind, California has very stringent rules. There's Prop 65, where, pretty much everything has a Prop 65 label on it nowadays. But there's other mechanisms, I think, that are already in place that should protect this. And a lot of the problems that I think we've heard about in the past have come from, non-legal operators. So anyways, that's kind of my thought on this. If Member Cermak could, come up with something else that's a little more specific towards, kind of targeting the end goals as opposed to kind of starting upstream and blocking everything, I'd be more supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Wu. Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. And this is Committee Member Lynch seconding Cermak's amended motion because I believe, the public health crisis, in addition to the, appeal to youth, is, sufficient enough for us to take action. And I believe this modified amendment addresses both the issues that were raised regarding the FDA and the hemp issue that Naval addressed. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Committee Member Lynch. Committee Member Boboian, I see that your hand is raised. And just to remind members to speak slowly and clearly into the mic. For the court reporter, you can go ahead and lower your hand, Committee Member Boboian, and unmute yourself.
Yes, I had two follow-up comments on the conversation discussion about appealing to youth. That's something that's more addressable in the advertising and marketing section of the regulations as opposed to the ingredients in the manufactured products. It's the packaging and labeling that makes something attractive to children. And right now, I think we've got pretty stringent requirements on that anyway. And when we talk about underage sales, the dispensaries, you have to be a certain age. Almost everybody that walks in, even with white hair, gets carded at a dispensary. Again, we're talking about something that's more relevant to the illegal operators and street level production, where the legal dispensary is never going to risk their license or their business for an underage sale, where the kid walking, buying product from an alley or buying from an illegal dispensary, they have no problems with the underage sales. So again, does restricting the ingredients really have that benefit of protecting youth and the public against something that's already addressed in advertising?
Thank you, Committee Member Boboian. Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is still raised. Did you want an additional comment? If not, go ahead and lower it. Thank you. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can lower it and unmute yourself.
Well, I think it's narrow to think that only advertising is what makes a product attractive to youth. If you have a pink bubblegum product, the name used in advertising is going to be attractive to youth. But if they find that it doesn't taste like pink bubblegum, it's not going to remain attractive to youth. The product itself is as much or more of an attraction. The advertising draws someone in, the product keeps someone there. So I think it's too narrow to say that the attractiveness to youth is only in the advertising and not in the product itself. In terms of the one other clarification, I guess I should make that I'm not making as clearly as I should in the motion, is that I'm trying to say that the FDA does have say over the solvents, all the other ingredients that are in vaping and other products, and that's probably where the FDA has a real say in terms of what's recognized as safe and not and unsafe.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Boboian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
Yes, on the issue with attractiveness to children, I would agree with Dr. Cermak if we were talking about gummies and edibles and stuff that can be made to look like candy. When we're talking about oils and vaporizers and stuff that's specifically combustible, if it's already addressed in the packaging, you're not going to be able to tell one vape from another vape what's bubblicious and what's regular. When we talk about the FDA does, whatever the FDA has say over is already applicable to the cannabis industry. So developing additional restrictions on it doesn't really do much again.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboian. Committee Member Nevdal, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Committee Member Nevedal. Not to belabor the point, but the advertising restrictions on legal cannabis products are pretty rigorous, meaning that it's unlikely that legal cannabis entities are marketing to youth to begin with. But we do have challenges in the fact that our legal cannabis or our licensing authorities and the legal side of the cannabis space those enforcement components, we can't draft enough regulations and rules to manage how the illegal space of the cannabis industry markets and interacts with our youth. So I guess my short, let me just bring my point around. I feel like what we're trying to do here with this motion, and that we've tried to do with some of our advertising and marketing motions, is to curb the marketing towards youth that's happening in the illicit marketplace. And I am concerned that while it's been pointed out, a lot of the illness that was associated with the Valley crisis last year had to do with the illicit market. So I'm just concerned that we're putting more red tape potentially around legal operators in an effort to address public health that's largely an issue associated with illicit activities. So I'll leave it there. And I do want to also, well, I won't leave it there. I just want to say thank you for the attention towards public health. I just don't know that the legal market is where we're having that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Navdal. Committee Member Stevenson, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
I'd like to say that many consumer packaged goods have enhanced flavor profiles, whether it's potato chips, beverage drinks, to alcohol. Having infused flavor profiles, it is my opinion, does not increase cannabis consumption. It only provides a choice of flavor profiles. And like many of the committee members have already stated, the issue is not occurring in the regulated market, but in the unregulated market. And that's something that we can't really address outside of BCC enforcement.
Thank you, Committee Member Stevenson. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
If it is true that the flavorings used in the legal market are not part of the problem in terms of products that are attractive to youth, who can easily get these by having a friend who's 22 years old, and it could be their choice for the flavored, the highly flavored, the deliciously flavored products. That would be a good thing if the legal industry is not part of the problem. If you don't have a regulation like what I'm suggesting, then the legal market will compete. And it'll compete with every bit of flavoring enhancement that it can. And what I am attempting to do is to protect the legal market from the natural entrepreneurial race to the bottom to achieve as much attractiveness as they can, not necessarily motivated by let's get people under 21 to get hooked on this, but we need to look at the consequences of the attractiveness for younger people. So I see this as a measure to protect the industry, and I guess that's enough right there.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Boboian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
Yes, on the topic of underage and having somebody older purchasing products, one, that's a completely different criminal issue in and of itself. Second, if you got a teenager or a kid smoking cannabis, I think the problem is more with smoking cannabis than them smoking flavored cannabis. So the flavor, again, doesn't really matter. You're harming the consumers that are responsible, that are old enough and to make their own decisions. And again, it's really about identifying what exactly is the problem that we're trying to address here. If it's the youth use, that's more of an advertising issue than it is ingredients and manufactured products.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak.
Well, then I think we should ask the Department of Public Health why they are so vigorously pursuing the eliminations of flavorings from tobacco products.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Boboian, I see that your hand is raised. Go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
I think it wouldn't be a fair comparison to compared to the nicotine and tobacco industry. That's an industry that's decades, centuries old. It's something that's just evolved over time. Cannabis it's at a completely different place. And again, it's not even the same product. The only similarities between cannabis and tobacco is the fact that you can inhale it both. But that's just one method of consumption for cannabis. The unintended consequences of limiting the ingredients is you're limiting the potential products that the consumers need, the full profile, the full spectrum, everything above. When we talk about flavored stuff, if you want to compare it to medicine and pharmaceuticals, you've got Bubblicious gummies for kids that's being prescribed by doctors, and that's completely 100% legal. So the flavor alone doesn't influence the decision, at least the one that's made to you.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboian. Chair Farrow, I see that your hand is up. And would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is open up to some public comment now. And then before we take the vote, after we've concluded public comment, I will allow for a few comments before calling the roll.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I am opening the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type "I would like to make a public comment" in the Ask field. Type "I would like to make a comment" and send to all panelists. Please note that we do have a court reporter that is transcribing all of what everybody is saying. So please identify yourself clearly, speak clearly, and effectively. You will have 90 seconds to make your public comment and be given a 30-second warning. With that, our first public comment comes from a Mitchell Colbert. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, this is Mitchell Colbert, Full Spectrum Strategy. Thank you so much for your time today and taking my public comment. Just echoing something I heard a committee member say, there will 100% be unintended consequences to any attempt to restrict which terpenes can be used, as terpenes are not unique to the cannabis plant, but they're shared across all plants. One speaker mentioned the name pink bubblegum. It's important to note that names like that, when it comes to cannabis, are the names of strains or cultivars, not flavors being added to oils. Terpenes are things like myrcene, which is in mangoes and numerous other plants, pinene, which is named for pine trees, eucalyptol, which is named for eucalyptus. The list goes on and on. While there is a vested interest to curb the appeal of youth, a terpene ban is not the right approach. If you want to protect the youth, you should actually enforce rules around billboard advertising, which is laughably unenforced. I live in the Bay Area. I regularly see billboards near schools and areas where youth congregate. So, enforce your existing rules before creating new obstacles. Terpenes are required for the proper standardization of oils and vape pens, and they are the safest natural agent to use, rather than chemicals like MCT oil, propylene glycol, and vegetable glycerin. Before the use of thinning agents like terpenes, oil pens had a horrendous failure rate. As Committee Member Nevedal and other committee members have made clear, the EVALI crisis was caused by the illegal market, not the legal market, and it was largely due to additives that are banned in some legal markets. If you want to stop another EVALI epidemic, ban the use of vitamin E acetate and require the tests for it like Colorado and other states have already done. Thank you for your time.
Next public comment comes from Paul Hansberry. Your microphone is unmuted.
Good. Thank you for all of your hard work. Unfortunately, with the interpretation with the regulators, one thing that comes to my mind all too often is that there are solutions looking for problems. I wholeheartedly agree with the comments that were made by Member Babyllion and Nevedal. These things the cannabis is so highly regulated. The testing procedures are so onerous and so restrictive that additional red tape and additional restrictions are totally unnecessary. Again, this seems like a solution looking for a problem. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from Dylan Burns. Your microphone is unmuted.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Dylan Burns with Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, a testing lab down in San Diego. I'd like to acknowledge comments made by committee members Bobolian and Nevedal. Our lab did an extensive investigation when the vaping crisis was hitting the headlines, and no legal products contain any diluents like vitamin E or pine tree oil is what's in the headlines currently. A lot of what's being said, I think you guys, I would say it should be considered that for the youth, with vape products, they're going to be looking for products that are high in THC. I mean, they're smoking to get high. And if they're adding extensive amounts of flavor additives, that's going to knock down the potency, and kids aren't going to want to buy that. I urge committee member Cermak to consider what he's suggesting from a lab testing perspective. If you're allowing cannabis-derived terpenes, but not botanically derived terpenes, how can that be enforced? How can that be monitored or enforced? Both sets of terpenes are essentially identical, so you couldn't really distinguish one from the other. The vaping industry is huge, and the addition of terpenes is essential to the success of that sector of our industry. That's all the comments I'd like to thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes from Jason Sharouche. Your microphone is unmuted.
Members of the committee, this is Jason Srush from the Public Health Institute. I'd just like to clarify that the goal is to prevent exogenous, non-cannabis derived terpenes from being added into cannabis extracts intended for inhalation. If a manufacturer wants to isolate terpenes from the original extract during a refinement process and add them back in, they're free to do so. The addition of ingredients commonly used to dilute cannabis extracts intended for inhalation, like propylene glycol or polyethylene glycol, should be allowed. To address the comment that none of the cases of EVALI were linked to regulated cannabis products, that's simply false. Without going into much detail, I can assure you that there were cases of EVALI where the patient reported that they only vape products from legal regulated dispensaries. To address the concerns related to the FDA's view on cannabis, terpenes, while they are generally recognized as safe for oral consumption by the FDA, they're not deemed safe for inhalation. This is why we simply want to prevent them from being added into a cannabis extract at amounts higher than the original plant extract contained. You can reference Michigan's legislation that prohibits flavor additives like botanically derived terpenes to cannabis products intended in inhalation unless they are listed as safe for inhalation by the FDA and the concentration does not exceed the maximum concentration listed in the FDA inactive ingredient database. Keep in mind that Michigan currently has a thriving adult use cannabis market and has already implemented this legislation. Thank you.
Next public comment comes from Lori Andrade. Your microphone is unmuted. Lori Andrade. Our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you very much, Chair Farrow and committee members. I would like to speak strongly in support of Dr. Cermak's motion as stated. It is my strong belief that the cannabis plant does provide terpenes at levels of concentration and mixtures that are suitable for inhalation. Nobody's smoking pine trees or mangoes or any of that to get the terpenes from those plants. people smoke cannabis, and inhalation is a completely different method of ingestion or bringing the cannabis chemistry into the body. I have deep trust that the cannabis plant in and of itself can do no harm with the mixture of terpenes and cannabinoids it provides. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Next public comment comes from Peter H. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for your attention on this issue today. I just wanted to speak and echo what's been already said today in regards to the safety issue being kind of a hypothetical and the want to overregulate to protect something that may not be official or may not be an actual issue in the industry. What I fear is that it might actually hamper the legal businesses and it does not address the majority of the problem, which is echoed in the black markets or illicit markets. So I just caution the members today on regulating on things that are not certainties, because it really may put the direction of the industry in a downward spiral versus allowing terpenes, which are naturally occurring. They do come in flavors just naturally in plants such as bubblegum or blueberry or strawberry or different flavors. So I don't see how you're going to regulate one without the natural terpenes also being included into that, which may be problematic for actual licensed manufacturers. So I just want to support what Member Baboyan and some of the other speakers have said. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from Ross Gordon. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, everyone. This is Ross Gordon on behalf of Humboldt County Growers Alliance. Appreciate the conversation. I think this is something we've talked about a bit with our membership, but we haven't had too much of a chance to delve into. So I don't want to jump the gun on having those conversations with our own members. So just want to briefly weigh in on just a technical topic, the conversation around including the FDA in the motion. Committee member Cermak, if I understand correctly, what you're trying to get at with the FDA is sort of additional flavors and FDA regulation. And it's something that frankly, I haven't researched deeply and I'm not that knowledgeable about, but I would just say that the inclusion of the reference to the FDA does make me uncomfortable given what's been mentioned, that obviously cannabis is federally prohibited. And none of it is really FDA approved, and there's not the level of research or process that's necessary to look into that. And so just referencing the FDA as the authority on that, a little concerning. So definitely want to prioritize public health and safety, but I think would recommend removing that reference from the motion. Thank you.
And sir, this is a court reporter. Could you tell me where you're from again? I did not get that at the beginning when you talked about it.
Ross Gordon, Humboldt County Growers Alliance.
I did not hear that again, sir. Just say it slowly, please.
Yes, Humboldt County Growers Alliance.
Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Lynn Silver. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you very much. This is Dr. Lynn Silver from the Public Health Institute. As a pediatrician, I strongly support Dr. Cermak's motions. There are two issues. The first issue is that flavored products and products marketed as flavors are being massively marketed to young people, both adolescents and young adults, and are well known to attract youth. Both product composition and marketing strategies are used. The committee needs to address both, but today we are talking about ingredients and must address the relevant formulation issues first. There is massive scientific evidence that characterizing flavors are used to attract youth. All of you know that the tobacco industry denied this for years, and so does the cannabis industry today. Flavored products are by no means limited to the illicit market. That is completely false, and I can show you large numbers of legal products with those characteristics. All of you know and have seen the news on Juul and flavored e-cigarettes, and these products are being taken off the market precisely because they attract youth. The committee cannot and should not deny the clear science on this. The second issue is safety for inhalation. It should allow cannabis and cannabis oils and only additional ingredients deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA. Botanical terpenes cannot be presumed safe for inhalation, added botanical terpenes, just because the interested industry says so. Human lungs are the same whether you are inhaling an asthma medicine or a cannabis product. We are not saying not to include cannabis, but not to add additional chemical components that have not been demonstrated safe for inhalation.
time was reached. This is a reminder to the public. If you would like to make a public comment, please follow the instructions displayed on your screen. Also, you will have 90 seconds to make your public comment and be given a 30-second warning. Next public comment comes from Michael Wheeler. Your microphone is unmuted.
Good morning, committee members. I'm Michael Wheeler, speaking on behalf of Flocana. I appreciate the attention on public health here today. I've got 3 boys of my own, and so that's something that's important to me, but I don't really think the committee today has enough information to truly take action unless we're only talking about something like vitamin E acetate. Because really what I hear in the discussion is that we're conflating 2 things. We're conflating teen vaping, which is a real issue, and flavorings in cannabis. And I would remind the committee along the lines of what Committee Member Nevedal and Bouboulian said, which was clearly the cannabis industry already has a number of clear guidelines around not advertising to children or around children, only 21 and older in dispensaries. And I would bring this key point up for the committee, which is that cannabis vapes are not what teens use for tricks, and tricks,
30 seconds.
Vape tricks are what is cool about vaping. I would encourage you to look at YouTube, look up vape tricks. That's what's cool about vapes, and you can't do tricks with cannabis vapes. So it's not that cannabis flavored vapes are what kids are using for tricks, and that's really what's driving them to vape in the first place. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Wesley Hine. Your microphone is unmuted.
Good morning. Wesley Hine with Mammoth Distribution. I respectfully ask the panel to not conflate what type of plant that a particular terpene molecule is derived from, whether that plant is a cannabis plant or whether that plant is, for example, a mango plant. The molecules are identical. There are valid manufacturing reasons to use terpenes derived from plants other than cannabis plants. These involve consistency and safety. The consequences of prohibiting botanically derived terpenes will do nothing more than hurt licensed, tested, regulated products and will be a boon to illicit market products. Those are the products going to the youth market. Over 30 million legal vapes were sold in California, and yet the vape crisis didn't happen until last year's vitamin E acetate crisis in the illicit market.
30 seconds.
We urge the panel to not help the illicit market by prohibiting botanical terpenes. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Lindsay Robinson. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, this is Lindsay Robinson from the California Cannabis Industry Association. Appreciate you taking my comment today. I would agree with Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Hine on most of their comments that they just expressed. I'm very concerned about how we would ever enforce a motion like this in terms of distinguishing where the terpenes are from. I also fear that it would be incredibly overbearing and burdensome to the regulated industry. And again, echoing the sentiments that where we're seeing these problems for the most part with public safety is from the illicit industry, and we can't regulate the licensed industry out of that problem. I would also encourage the Department of Public Health to work with LCCS, which is the Legal Cannabis for Consumer Safety Group, which is a large group of licensed holders and advocacy groups, along with scientists who are working on recommendations around these issues. I agree that I do not believe that the committee currently has enough information to vote on this motion today. I think it's a really complex issue, and I would hate for us to be over prescriptive. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Mario Martin. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Mario Martin on behalf of UGA. And I love the mind ping pong that's going on right now on this conversation, but and that doesn't have me much to add except for in botanical life, anytime you add a terpene to a cannabinoid, there's something called an entourage effect or a direct healing effect in the human body. So we should keep that in mind as we're making these decisions and lean on already proven clinical trials from the FDA as our guide. You know what I mean? So thank you for listening.
Our next public comment comes from Joanna Cedar. Your microphone is unmuted. Joanna, you are
Yes,
unmuted.
can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you for taking my comments. This is Joanna Cedar with the Cedar Group representing Sonoma County Growers Alliance. I agree with the comments made by committee members Aboulian and Nevedal. In particular, thank you, Member Aboulian, for rejecting the analogy between tobacco and cannabis in this issue. I also agree with most of the speakers thus far. This motion has way too many unintended consequences. It does not take into consideration what terpenes are and from where they are derived. In this case, the science matters. Cannabis and hemp have bioidentical terpenes. In this motion, there is no differentiation between cannabis hemp-derived terpenes, natural botanically derived terpenes, and synthetically derived terpenes. And until we understand
30 seconds.
How those are used in the supply chain, then it is way too early for the committee members to make a decision around this issue. I would suggest a lot more education about this before you move forward. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from a Lori Andrade. Your microphone is unmuted. Lori? Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as Sasha L. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, my name's Sasha. I just have a quick question. Could we restate the motion?
This is the co-moderator. We will be restating the motion after the completion of public comment.
We have an individual identified as Lori Andrade. Your microphone is unmuted. It appears that we have no additional requests for public comments. Would you like me to close this feature?
Could you relook at the list because it appears that we may have one additional one that has not made a comment, moderator?
Sasha L., your microphone is unmuted.
Okay, obviously I'm mistaken. So if we could close this feature. Oh, there is one more.
Chi Su would like to make a comment.
I will give me a second to find them in the attendee list. It does not appear the name provided has an audio connection.
Could we ask that she type her question into the body? Is that appropriate? I think yesterday you gave an example of that. Okay.
With that, there are no additional requests for public comment. I will wait for direction.
Very good. So could we have the motion reread? And then we have a couple committee members, I think, that wanted to make additional comments post public comment before taking a vote.
Thank you. So the motion is that the CAC recommends that inhaled products, including vape cartridges, dab, shatter, wax, and pre-rolls, can contain only cannabis, cannabis oils, and other ingredients harvested from cannabis plants unless not deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA. Terpenes not part of harvested cannabis plants and flavorings other than those inherent in harvested cannabis plants are not permitted in inhaled and combustible products.
And Kayla, could you recall on the committee member that has his hand raised, please?
Dr. Cermak, if we can have clarification from you, is it supposed to be unless not deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA or unless deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA?
Not deemed safe.
Thank you.
So it appears, Dr. Cermak, your hand is raised. Are you looking to make an additional comment?
Yes, I am. Thank you for calling on me. I feel a little bit like 30 or 40 years ago at tobacco hearings, where it's too complex, there's not enough known. But the most pernicious of the arguments that I hear is that there is no similarity between nicotine, between tobacco and cannabis. I am really sorry to tell you the unfortunate reality that both nicotine and THC interact with our reward system, the nucleus accumbens. They both have an outpouring of dopamine. They both lead to changes, literal structural changes within the reward system. Cannabis, the THC in cannabis, lowers the number of cannabinoid receptors between 20 and 60% after only 2 weeks of daily use, depending on what part of the brain you're looking at. I just spent 4 years writing a book on the science of cannabis for healthcare professionals, so they have an objective look at all of the literature that's there. Cannabis is something that people can and do become dependent on. So to say there's no equivalence between tobacco and cannabis is ignoring one of the most profound and important public health considerations that we need to take into our regulations. I look forward to the time when I can also provide a motion about high THC products and the need we have for looking at the consequences of that. We are legalizing the sale of high THC products without knowing their safety profiles. And if the industry is not going to get into trouble, it needs to take that seriously. So all I am doing is saying we want to follow what has been such a hard-won battle with tobacco, which is to keep the flavorings out of this for a variety of reasons. Some of them safety, and some of them about attractiveness to youth. And that's about safety because they become dependent on it, on cannabis, far faster and at a far higher rate than adults do. So anything we can do to reduce the attractiveness to youth is something we should be considering. Now, when people say that the terpenes, there's no difference between terpenes in cannabis and terpenes in all other kind of botanicals. Fine, there's no difference. So why add things that aren't in cannabis? The cannabis plant grew up with its set of terpenes that goes with its CBD, its THC, and all the other cannabinoids. And all I'm suggesting is that we restrict the products to what is present already in the cannabis plant. And when people want to add other things and want to say, you can suck it into your lungs and you'll be fine, but you don't have proof, I think that is reckless and irresponsible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Boboyan, I see that your hand is raised. If you have a comment, please go ahead and lower it and unmute yourself.
Yes, a couple of closing thoughts. When we're talking about comparing nicotine and cannabis, nicotine is not a naturally occurring thing in the human organism. When Dr. Cermak suggested a conversation about high THC products, that's exactly what you're going to get when you do away with all the available ingredients. For all the talk about this being harmful, no one has provided a single case of this issue causing the public harm. There was a comment made by the public about how it's been proven that characterizing the flavor is attractive to children. The key word there is characterizing the flavor, not the ingredient itself. And that's an advertising issue, not an ingredient one. When we're talking about, there was a comment about people not inhaling mangoes. It's not about inhaling mangoes, but it is the same. It is to say that the same terpene exists in cannabis. And if we're talking about that terpene being harmful when inhaled, how do you address inhaling it when it's still when you're doing it in flower form? So it's the same terpene being inhaled. And all this does is it just overcomplicates, overregulates, and creates that many more hurdles and roadblocks. So again, my closing thoughts on this would be to really reconsider this motion in its entirety.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboyan. Committee Member Nevedal, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello, this is Committee Member Nevedal. I do think some good questions were brought up during public comment about enforceability. So if the molecular structure of terpenes extracted from...
I'm sorry, there's some...
I know, I'll pause, sorry.
I'm sorry, there's some noise that I just can't, some loud noises. Could you start that again?
Yes, my apologies. Committee Member Nevedal, and I just wanted to say that there were some great public comments that question enforceability. So if it's true that terpenes that exist in cannabis when extracted from botanical plants such as basil or lemon are indistinguishable in the lab testing arena, I think this is going to have some real potential issues in enforcement.
I'm sorry. There's still some background noise, and I'm just not getting every word. I'm sorry. And can you get a little closer to the mic? You were really good for a minute.
Is that better? Can you hear me better now?
Much, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So I am questioning enforcement. So I think it was brought to our attention during public comment that the terpenes extracted from basil that also appear, say, in cannabis or are in the cannabis plant are unidentifiable. The difference between them are unidentifiable in lab testing. And if that's the case, this is going to be potentially very challenging to enforce. The difference between botanical terpene that has been added versus a cannabis terpene that has been added. So I have concerns about those pieces. And I think there are some significant differences between tobacco and cannabis. And largely, I think it's in the way that the two different industries have been regulated around the cultivation and the manufacturing of those products and the product safety pieces that have been put into place. So cannabis has many, many layers of regulation, both in the cultivation and the manufacturing realm that bring the product safety levels significantly up above that bar, up above anything we've seen in tobacco. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevedal. Committee Member Wu, I see that your hand is raised. If you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I just kind of want to summarize kind of my thoughts. Everyone had a lot of good points. But ultimately, right, I just want to reiterate, I think there are going to be better mechanisms to protect children, right? Rather than focusing on ingredients, right? You know, that there's other ways to go about doing that. Dr. Cermak's kind of, note about cannabis use and the impact it has on the body and reducing the number of receptors that you have. I mean, I find that fascinating. But then I wonder, right, is that a conversation about protecting children, or is that saying we should ban cannabis altogether then? Right? I mean, that's a data point that I think is less directed at children than overall. And again, I know we want to protect children, so I'm saying let's focus on doing that, but with other mechanisms. We can go really hard, really strong on everything else, but this measure is overreaching, I think, and is going to have unintended operational consequences on legal operators that are already struggling to compete with the illicit market, right? So I just really, I appreciate the sentiment. I don't think this is what gets us there. I just think this is akin to like saying, hey, let's ban, car companies from making, cup holders, because cup holders can theoretically hold alcohol, and we want to, stop drunk driving. It just, I don't see the direct, aspect of that. So anyways, that's my comment.
Thank you, Committee Member Wu. Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Really appreciate the public comment and the comments. I think the reality is flavoring is attractive to youth. And when we look at tobacco and the reference to advertising, the movement is not to ban the advertising of flavored tobacco. It's to ban flavored tobacco. And the reason is because it appeals to youth. Not only do the studies show that, but we all have children, and we also know that where there's no flavoring, because it can be smelled in bathroom stalls in high schools, kids don't use it as much. And so the reference to it not being relevant to youth usage just flies in the face of the studies and flies in the face of everything we know about tobacco. And so for those reasons, as well as the important references that the Public Health Institute speaker spoke to, I strongly second my motion.
Very good. So at this point, it looks like it's an appropriate time for us to call the roll on the motion. Would you reread the motion back so that way everybody knows what they're voting?
I do have my hand raised. This is Tim Cermak.
Dr. Cermak, I don't know if a comment that you would make right now would change the outcome of it. If it fails and you wish to remake a motion, that might address some of that, but it appears that we probably have beaten a dead horse here, and we should probably be moving forward. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but
when there are allegations made of me that are not true, I think I have a right to counter those. For anyone to be saying that I am trying to ban cannabis or that I'm moving in that direction is absolutely. I do understand that acknowledging the risks is something you might want to defend against because it worries you, but there are actual risks. And I think if the industry doesn't acknowledge those risks, it's going to put itself in jeopardy. But I worked with member Todd on actually writing the original proposition. And so to say that I'm moving towards banning is simply not accurate.
Sure. So here's what I would say, as I didn't believe any of it was a direct attack on you, and had they, I would have come to your defense. I do believe that there's a difference of opinion about where or how we move a piece of legislation to address both consumption by youth and public health. And, I agree with you if we can clearly put something together, because I think, here's what I would say. I think everybody that made comment today did not come to it as a frame that says we want to sell a product that we knowingly believe is unhealthy or directly will be marketed to youth. So I think you're absolutely right that the committee's role here is to try to make rules or recommendations so that rules can be made that we address public safety and reduce the likelihood of encouraging youth acquiring the products. And so if you feel that you still need to defend your character, I will welcome you doing that, but I don't think that's the issue at this point. I think we all know that you've done a very good job on this advisory committee, highlighting areas of concern, and you made a motion that raised a lot of good questions that people addressed, both in support and in opposition, and we should take that roll vote right now.
This is Member Wu. Can I just speak up? You know, I completely 100% was in no way trying to attack Dr. Cermak or even suggest that he is anti-cannabis. So I apologize if what I said came off that way. You know, I'm trying to kind of come up with thoughts in a very quick manner here. So, you know, if I miscommunicated that, I apologize. You know, in no way am I attacking Dr. Cermak and his support of the industry. So I apologize.
Thank you, Committee Member Wu.
So at this point, can we call the roll?
Yes, so the motion is that the CAC recommend that inhaled products, including vape cartridges, dab, shatter, wax, and pre-rolls, can contain only cannabis, cannabis oils, and other ingredients harvested from cannabis plants unless not deemed safe for inhalation by the FDA. Terpenes not part of harvested cannabis plants and flavorings other than those inherent in harvested cannabis plants are not permitted in inhaled and combustible products. And with that, we will go to the vote. William?
Strong no.
Committee Member Boboyan? I'm sorry?
Strong no.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Cermak?
Aye.
Thank you. Clifford?
Aye.
Farrow?
Nay.
Heidelback?
Nay.
Harada?
Aye.
Huffman?
Aye.
Lynch?
Aye.
Nevdal?
Nay.
Peck? Committee Member Peck?
Nay.
Was that nay or a, Committee Member Peck? Peck.
Did you get that?
No, did you say nay or yay?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stevenson?
Absolutely no.
Oh. Williams?
Yes.
Wu?
No.
And you?
Abstain.
Motion fails.
Are there any other recommendations on this item? Dr. Cermak. Dr. Cermak, you have your hand raised. I recognize you.
Thank you very much for patience when I have trouble finding everything. What I'm wondering about is whether or not the ingredient of THC and high THC is considered part of this issue. because of my concern about the proven impact of higher THC, particularly when there's no CBD balancing it. The impact on higher impact on dependence and on mental health issues. That I'm looking for an opportunity to provide a motion to be dealing with the public health concerns related to that. I mean, one of the things we could do is look at what Quebec has done in terms of limiting the concentration of THC to 30% in its vape cartridges, or there's a possibility of using vape cartridges that are metered so that only a certain amount comes out, or even mandating that as a public health protection that the CBD THC ratio be kept within certain limits. There's a lot that's not known here. And so what I would like to do is to move that we recommend the CDPH convene a panel of experts to review the scientific literature on the consequences of high THC products and provide a report with potential public health guidelines. This would provide us the information that regulatory agencies need in order to protect the paramount focus on public health that's in MOXTRA.
I second that motion. Al Zuckman.
Okay, let me see if that's on topic. I'm trying to get some feedback if it's on the agenda item we're discussing at this point. I would have been happy to consider an amendment to the earlier one that that allowed for botanical extracted terpenes to be used, and provided that they're deemed safe by, unless deemed unsafe by the Department of Health, and limiting synthetic terpenes, because there becomes other issues introducing a synthetic product into a consumed item. So that I would have been more likely to support, because I believe that would have allowed the industry to continue to create products that were enjoyable by consumers, but would be using products that have been used safely in other products, and would not have been so restrictive that basically changed the entire industry without any really good science behind it. Although there is differing opinions on the science, the terpene portion of it is still a concern for me. I believe anything that's biologically created and consumed in other products, whether that is, what is being consumed in October when pumpkin spice is the thing people are consuming at high rates in coffee, or whether it's vanilla Coke or orange Coke, those items are enjoyed by consumers, hopefully responsibly, but don't pose any particular consumer safety issue at this time. I just was worried that the way it was written was overly restrictive and would not necessarily protect consumers, because it would be produced by an illegal market that the legal market couldn't ensure that there was a product that was safely produced that was available. So that was my reason for rejecting that, Dr. Cermak. And so I would have entertained something, at least from my perspective. I don't know if any of the other folks who voted nay would be receptive to that modification. So.
I think Mr. Cermak was trying to make a motion, and then Ms. Huffman seconded it. Unfortunately, he was speaking so quickly, we didn't get it all down. And from what I could hear, it sounded as if we may be going off of the agenda topic. So I think we need to kind of sort that out a little bit before we start jumping into additional motions. So Dr. Cermak, was that intended to be a motion? And if so, we're going to need you to repeat it so that we can get it down because you are talking very, very quickly.
And who is just speaking now? Is this Ms.
Tamara Colson.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Committee Member Cermak, you are unmuted, so you can.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to make a motion if it's permitted within the agenda right now. So I'll repeat it, and then we can decide what to do. I'm having to find it though. Oh, here it is. The motion is that we recommend CDPH convene a panel of experts to review scientific literature on the consequences of high THC product use and provide a report with potential public health guidelines.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. So I'm going to repeat the motion. So it is to recommend that CDPH convene a panel of experts to review scientific literature on the consequences of high THC product use and provide a report with potential public health guidelines. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is Tamara again. I think to the extent we're talking about ingredients within inhaled products, if that's what you're intending by the high THC, we could probably move forward with this motion under this agenda item. Ms. Huffman, are you still seconding the motion? Was that the motion you intended to second?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, you can go on.
So we have a motion and a second for the committee to consider. I open it up for discussion from committee members.
Committee Member Wu, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Sure. Member Wu speaking. Dr. Cermak, could I suggest a slight, I'm completely supportive. I've always been, consistent in terms of asking for more data or having, CDPH and BCC share more data with us on the industry, regardless of the subject matter. On this one, I was hoping that maybe you can ask the panel of experts not to present a report, but present data. To me, a report indicates that they are, placing their opinion based on the data. I am interested in seeing the data. So whether they want to present the report and the data supporting, I just want to make sure that we're allowed to see everything before kind of then saying this is the conclusion. So that's just my suggestion.
Thank you, Committee Member Wu. Committee Member Cermak, I saw that your hand was raised and then it went down. If you would like to make a comment, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your comment. It is the data which is important. And I do think that given the data, any opinions they have about, potential guidelines would also be useful. But I don't require the word report in it.
Thank you, Dr. Cermak. Committee Member Stevenson, I saw that your hand was raised, but it went down. If you would like to make a comment, please just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Tamara again. I think Rasha from Public Health, did you have a comment you wanted to add to the conversation?
Thank you, Tamara. Good morning, everyone. This is Rasha from Public Health. I just want to acknowledge that this topic that is placed on the agenda is specific to ingredients and inhalable products. So I think if we start talking about THC, this is not a topic that's noticed in our current agenda. Would the chair be amenable to maybe this become a topic for another committee meeting, if that's appropriate?
Well, it appears that there's some interest in it. So if we are not considering THC as a ingredient, then yes, we have our September meeting. If we can adjust our, outline to ensure that we can cover this particular motion, since we have a motion and a second, it would be very helpful. Dr. Cermak, would that be amenable to you? Somebody?
This is Tim Cermak. I'm not sure how we can not consider THC an ingredient, since without it, we wouldn't have a product. But if it's placed on the agenda for 1 month from now, I'm fine with that so that we can move on.
Very good. So let's, are there any other motions to item A before we move on to?
This is Tamara again. I just want to clarify for the record, Dr. Cermak, that means you're that this motion's not going to go forward today, correct? That you're withdrawing it for today?
I'm fine with tabling it until
Tabling, okay.
The next meeting, which is 1 month from now. Yes.
I second it.
Just want to make sure Ms. Huffman was going to second that too. Okay, thank you. Now you can move on.
Okay.
Do we have any other recommendations related to item A of the agenda number 9? And if not, can we move on to the classification of manufactured cannabis goods? Very good. And Ken, before we start discussing this particular sub-item to item 9, I've noticed that we've had a person from the public who's had their hand raised in the attendees section. Moderator, could you repeat, because some people joined the meeting after you gave direction on how people participate, to let them know that raising the hand won't get them addressed?
Absolutely. This is the moderator, and I just want to make sure all members of the public are aware that in order to participate in today's advisory committee meeting, when prompted by the committee, we will be displaying reference for you to request to make public comment. We will be utilizing the question and answer feature. Hand raise at this time are not going to be addressed. So an individual by the name of Kareem Kassan, if you could please lower your hand at this moment, and when appropriate time comes, you can request to make your public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. So we discussed this subsection of 9 yesterday, and I believe we discussed it briefly today. So I'm opening up this to committee members for discussion at this point. So do we have any committee members that have any opinions of the situation and recommendations for the consolidation of our licensing agencies? Remember, our purpose today is to prepare for a packet to be presented with the consolidation of the 3 licensing agencies under the new parent agency. So, thank you.
If any committee members would like to make a comment, please raise your hand, and please remember that there is a court reporter present. So when making a comment, please speak clearly and slowly, and make sure to limit any background noise.
Hello, Vicente Cedarberg. How may I direct your call? Give me one moment. Let me see if she's available. If not, I'll send you through to her voicemail.
I'm hearing somebody in the background and I see no mics open, but we're seeing no committee comments. So do we want to open this up to public comment? And that might stimulate some committee thoughts afterwards. So let's do that. Public comments on item 9, subcategory B, classification of manufactured cannabis products.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type "I would like to make a public comment" in the Ask field and send to all panelists. Any other identifying comments in the Q&A panel will not be addressed, and we do ask that you use the reference displayed on your screen.
Before you begin, moderator, if I can just remind public commenters, when you're typing into the Q&A feature, you only need to submit one "I would like to make a comment" for your first one. Once you have completed your public comment, if you'd like to make an additional one, then you can send an additional "I would like to make a comment" feature.
An individual identified as Sasha L., your microphone is unmuted. An individual identified as Ross Gordon, your microphone is unmuted. You will have 90 seconds with a 30-second reminder. You are unmuted.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ross Gordon on behalf of Humboldt County Growers Alliance. I think this is a really interesting topic and discussion. However, would like to encourage the committee not to take a position on this today for a few reasons. One is I think this is a topic where some good progress could be made, but I feel like there are a lot of potential implications to messing with some of these definitions. The boundaries of manufactured products help determine testing standards and allowable thresholds. They help determine which products distributors and manufacturers can handle or cannot handle, and they help determine allowable thresholds in terms of milligrams of THC for different types of product classes. And I just think those are subjects that should really be thought through about what the implications of changing some of these are. And I think the second part of this is that this was noticed on the agenda originally as just classification of manufactured products. That's the only insight we had as an organization to what would be discussed today, and that, in my view, didn't really help us get to a place where we could really analyze this question. More information and detail coming out yesterday was helpful, but I think it's just something that requires a little more consideration. And I would just say, like, on behalf of our members, I would not be sure what comment to give to you, because I think we just, really need to think on this. So I think it's a great discussion, but would encourage no action on it today. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Lynn Silver. Your microphone is unmuted.
This is Dr. Lynn Silver again from the Public Health Institute. Thank you. I just wanted to note in the conversation previous to the vote on the CDPH and potency, a member of the committee had said that they might be open to a modified or slightly amended version of the discussion on 9A and inhaled. That issue is too important to leave unresolved. We did nothing after the vaping epidemic. If it is possible for the committee to reach even a compromise on some greater protections for the community on that issue of inhaled cannabis, that would be great. So I hope that you will seek that either at this meeting or at a subsequent meeting, because we basically did nothing after the vaping epidemic, and that can't continue, or to address the issue of flavors. So I hope that you find a compromise solution that can protect people.
30 seconds.
I apologize for being slightly out of order on that one.
Our next public comment comes from a Wade Laughter. Your microphone is unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Wade Laughter with House of Harlequin. And in the language that was posted earlier, I saw something in this agenda item to the effect that we would look at the product classifications based on how the end user might consume or use the product. I think that's a really good thread to follow. That's all I have for today. And again, I would second the first public comment about we'd really like more information about what's really being talked about here and perhaps at the next meeting. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from a Joanna Cedar. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Joanna Cedar with the Cedar Group and Sonoma County Growers Alliance. I agree with the comments made by Mr. Gordon. This is an intriguing reclassification framework, so let's give it a little bit more time to work with stakeholders to develop this further before you take action. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from a Mitchell Colbert. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hey, Mitchell Colbert, Full Spectrum Strategy. Thank you all again for your time today and taking my comments. So a lot of talk has been made about nothing being done in California after the EVALI VAPI epidemic. I'd like to point to our neighbors east, Colorado. One big change they've done is they're now testing the vapor coming out of vape pens rather than the oil going into it. See, a problem that we've realized is if vape pens sit around for months and months and months, there can actually be an issue with heavy metals leaching out of the device, which normally wouldn't be a problem in short term. But if they're sitting in storage for months, there's actually a company in Massachusetts that just had to destroy a couple $1 million worth of vape pens that have been sitting around since Massachusetts banned vape pens after EVALI. And they found that there were elevated levels of lead, which is why they threw them out. So testing the vapor coming out makes a lot more sense than the oil going in. That's a common sense solution that could test for vitamin E acetate, for really whatever you want. That makes a lot more sense because no one's eating the oil, they're vaping the oil. Colorado is also testing for vitamin E acetate. We can make that change. There's a lot of changes we could do that are common sense changes that other states have done. We could just copy and paste the language they already have on this. And it makes a lot more sense to me to go for the common sense solutions rather than trying to conflate two issues, because the youth vaping epidemic is different from the EVALI epidemic. Yes, there's crossover, but it's not the same thing. And we shouldn't take a blunt hammer to two things that need a fine-toothed approach. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. This is the co-moderator. I just want to make a note to the public that we are taking public comments on 9B, classification of manufactured cannabis goods. And we had a question in the chat about restating a motion. And I just want to make clear that there was no motion presented. We are just taking public comment on the agenda item itself.
Our next public comment comes from Paul Hansberry. Your microphone is unmuted.
Good afternoon, and thank you for at least addressing this. I think it's an interesting, as I will echo what other speakers have said, it's a very interesting way to reclassify. There are a few things. One of the considerations where it says a small amount of pesticide may be toxic if ingested, but not if rubbed on the skin. I think that indicates that there's a lot more information and research that needs to be done before any action is taken. But it's an interesting approach to the way that it's consumed. And also the effects. For instance, there are some pesticides that are fine and approved for, like, say, apples or roses, but when it's ignited and then it becomes cyanide.
30 seconds.
So I think that it needs a little bit more investigation before any action is taken, but I think it's a very interesting approach. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from Dylan Burns. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, my name is Dylan Burns with Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs. Thank you for your time. Echoing what some of the other public comments have stated, I agree that it's an interesting conversation, and I do think it is needed change. We need to revisit the classification of manufactured cannabis products. In the testing of legal cannabis products for close to a few years now, we've seen a handful of products that kind of have been caught in the middle of regulation. For example, we had a Jello product come through recently that failed for water activity, and it's just really unfortunate because the reason for water activity is to kind of monitor the likelihood of mold forming due to the presence of moisture. And this is just a small example of how the regulation is keeping some manufacturers kind of caught in the middle because they can't get their product to market due to an unfortunate discrepancy in the regulation that doesn't really allow for certain types of products.
30 seconds.
There is definitely a big difference between a topical and an edible type product, and currently in the regulation there's no real distinction for action levels between the two, and I think it's very important to revisit this conversation soon. Those are all the comments I'd like to make. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from a Craig Johnson. Your microphone is unmuted.
This is Craig Johnson, Alpenglow Farms, Humboldt County. Thank you for the floor. I agree with Wade Laughter, Ross Gordon, and some of the other commenters. There is no room for any sort of pesticide in our medicine. We have to remember California first brought in cannabis as a medicine back in 1996. And for so many Californians, it is still that same medicine. So I feel we need to look deeper into this and push it forward for more conversation. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Laura P. Your microphone is unmuted. Laura P., please unmute your cell phone and your mic is open. Mr. Chair, it appears that we have received no additional requests for public comments. Would you like me to close this feature?
Please close the feature. So we're at a point now, we are at noon. I know that we need to make a decision whether we're going to take a lunch or whether we're going to take, a short break to allow people the opportunity for refreshment or using facilities or returning some calls. So is there any opposition to us just taking a short break from my committee, 15-minute break, and coming back and trying to finish these two remaining sections up, plus the end of section 9, agenda item number 9? Or does anyone feel that they really need to take a break for grabbing a meal?
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of a short break because I have to leave you within an hour.
Very good. So let's take a 15-minute break and resume at 12:20, and then we'll present this to the committee for conversation and possible motion, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. And I ask committee members to raise their hands if they have returned. You, Beverly. Ms. Huffman, are you back? Mr. Harada, have you returned? Ms. Williams? Ms. Peck, have you returned? I see you're live. Thank you. Mr. Clifford, have you returned? Thank you. Mr. Cermak, good. I see you're back. One more time, Mr. Harada, have you returned? Please raise your hand if you have. Ms. Huffman, have you returned? Are we at quorum? Very good. It appears that we're at quorum, and everybody can lower their hand at this point that have their hand raised unless they wish to speak to the agenda item 9B.
This is the co-moderator, Committee Member Stevenson. I saw your hand raised before we started checking for a quorum. Was that to let us know that you are back, or were you wishing to make a comment?
It was to let you know that I was back.
Thank you.
So Kayla, could you start identifying the members that have their hands raised if they wish to speak to agenda item 9B?
Yes, Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is raised. If you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and unmute yourself. Committee Member Cermak, your hand is raised. If you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and unmute yourself. Moderator, if we can have Committee Member Cermak unmuted, please. Committee Member Cermak, did you wish to make a comment?
No, I finally found how I can lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Committee Member Clifford, you have your hand raised. Would you like to make a comment? Okay. Chair, I do not see any additional hand raises. Committee members, if you are wishing to make a comment, please raise your hand and remember to speak slowly and clearly into your microphone.
It appears that none of the committee members wish to speak to the agenda item 9B.
You know I'm back, right, Alice?
Yes, yes. Alice.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. There is no requirement for us to take action on this. I can assure the public that made comments that the recording and transcript of this meeting will be available. There will be an opportunity as the licensing agencies do their work to make a draft recommendation for regulations that will be circulated. It will provide us an opportunity to provide input at that time. I see Dr. Cermak has raised his hand. Would we open Dr. Cermak's mic?
Yes, I am just curious as to whether or not, I think Chairman Farrow, it's you who was said that you had a compromise, potential compromise for Part A, and I was wondering whether or not we were just going to pass over that or if you were going to offer that at some point.
Well, it wasn't my intention to make a motion. It was my intention to support a motion if it was to include allowing botanical derived terpenes, provided that they are not deemed unsafe by departments of health, and exclude synthetic terpenes unless they're deemed safe by public health.
Well, I just think this is going to be an ongoing issue that we'll have to continue returning to and studying a little bit further. But thank you. I don't know what motion that you would want that put into. So I have nothing to add at this point.
Very good. Well, I think the record will reflect my comments, and as it moves to the Department of Public Health and the other agencies, they can consider those public comments that were made in crafting their draft regs. So on agenda item B, I think we're in the same situation. The only thing I would say that there are other potential ports of entry for cannabinoids and cannabis manufactured goods that should be also considered by the Department of Public Health as we go to come up with recommended regs in the merger of the 3 licensing agencies. So with that, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 10. So let me read the background for recommendations related to agenda item 10, distributors. The first item to consider is storage only services. The other item we will address hopefully today is trade samples between licensees. And 3, item C, required use of fully enclosed box containers or cages when transporting cannabis goods. I will note that it's come to my attention that as much as we would like to continue to push through, we have people that are supporting our work that are required under law to be able to get their regular breaks. So we will be taking a 30-minute break at 1 o'clock sharp. So knowing that, let's try to be as tight as possible on our comments and let people know if they've already commented on the item that you support their comments. So that way we can move along and get to our break as required by law for some of our supporting staff. So with that, I'm going to read this. Start storage only services. The question for the advisory committee is, licensed distributors may provide storage services to other licensees for cannabis. Excuse me, I lost my train of thought. Should the state consider making changes to the storage only regulatory framework? Current law, BPC section 26053, subsection D, requires each applicant or licensee to apply for and obtain a separate license for each location where the licensee engages in commercial cannabis activity. California Code of Regulations, Title VI, Section 5301 enables licensed distributors to provide storage services to other licensees. Currently, licensees utilizing storage-only services must have their cannabis goods transported from the storage-only distributor back to their own licensed premise before the cannabis goods are distributed to any other licensee. Bureau licensees have expressed confusion regarding what constitutes storage-only activities and have expressed a desire to have their cannabis goods transported from storage to other licensees without having the cannabis goods returned to their own licensed premise first. Considerations. Clarify the regulations to develop a storage-only framework that specifies the circumstances during which licensees may have their cannabis goods transferred from the storage-only premise to other licensees' premises. Such framework should harmonize licensees' storage-only activities with the licensed premise provisions contained in BPC section 26053, subsection D. So are there any comments by committee members on agenda item A from 10A, storage only services?
Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. Is that up from before, or would you wish to make a comment? Committee Member Nevdal, I see that your hand is raised. Would you like to make a comment?
I think you were trying to.
I cannot hear. I cannot hear.
This is Member Nevedal. I believe Member Cermak was trying to make a comment. So I don't know if we want to unmute him. I think he unmuted at the same time I did originally.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdal. Committee Member Cermak, are you wishing to make your comment? You can go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was too slow and everything, but no comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee Member Nevdal, if you are wishing to make a comment, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. This is Committee Member Nevedal. I mostly have a couple questions about the storage only services. I mean, I do agree that there has been a lot of confusion, and if a licensee chooses to move unfinished product to storage only facility, it's my understanding that that product cannot move forward largely because the only way for a distributor to move product is in final form post certificate of analysis. And I'm sorry, that might be referenced in the code sections that were presented that I have not looked up. My apologies there. So I'm wondering if, I guess just to make this a little more succinct, if there is a way to look at how the COA and the final form components play into this confusion. I also think if a licensee, it's probably helpful to note that if a licensee does not have the ability to store their product, maybe because of space issues and or local zoning, whatever the instances may be, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense that they would be able to receive that product back and then manage it from there. So I do think that this is an issue to ensure that there's a functioning storage only opportunity. I just am not maybe fully clear on the hangups of why the product can't move forward other than potentially the COA. So I will yield the floor. Thank you for letting me ask my questions.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdal. Is there any other committee members that wish to make a comment? If so, please raise your hand. Committee Member Boboian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, my question would be, what exactly is the insight the different agencies are looking for on this topic?
So I'm going to ask our attorney, Tamara Wilson, to comment on both. I'm getting feedback.
I'm sorry, I'm missing some of that. I don't know why, but maybe closer to the mic, sir.
Sure, I think it was that we had a couple mics in the same room open at the same time. So I'm going to ask Ms. Tamara Colston to respond to both the question raised by Committee Member Nevedal and Committee Member Boboian.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple clarifications that might facilitate your discussion. There are two different situations. If you're sending product to a distributor for testing, that's one situation. Storage only would be you do send it there just for storage purposes. And I believe, Ms. Nevedal, you correctly indicated that that is product that's in final form. I think if you look at the considerations and the questions for the committee, it kind of functions around the issue of if you've got your product stored on another distributor's or a distributor's premises for storage only purposes, there has been, I think, some discussion of why it would have to go back to your own premises versus was there a way maybe it could go from there to another premises. And so I think that's really kind of the question is, should we consider making changes in terms of that storage only framework, meaning it would have to going back to your premises. One of the things that we do have to keep in mind is that storage of cannabis is commercial cannabis activity. And you do have to do it consistent with the fact that you can only conduct cannabis activity on your own premises. So any change in framework, for example, saying it could go from one premise straight to whoever it's being delivered to, would also have to look at how would that work? Would that distributor then be doing, what would they be doing and how could they get it there? So I think the real question is, once it's stored, is there an interest in us taking a look at it going from where it's stored forward in the chain without going back to the premises of whomever is storing it? Is that helpful a little bit?
So this is Chair Farrow. The question is.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sir. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me? Can anybody else hear me now?
Now I'm good.
Okay. And I'm talking a little lower because I am in a room with some other folks, so I'll try to speak up. I guess the question is, do we change the definition of that activity away from either cannabis activity or cannabis support activity? Or do we make an exception specifically for that, make a recommendation on this, on a exemption for that particular process? I would imagine part of the reason for the interest is the additional moving of product creates, first of all, timing issues, or could be degradation of the product issues. But I also think it's probably dealing with the cost of transportation and aligning who would transport it and the time necessary to move it an additional step. So it seems like it's something we should think about.
This is Tamara again. I just want to remind you that the definition of commercial cannabis activity is actually statutory. So in looking at this issue, I think what you'd be looking at is a possibility of, is there a framework that would allow for that, maybe with certain requirements or restrictions to make sure that you're not going afoul that definition.
This is a co-moderator. I see a couple of hands are raised. So Committee Member Nevdal, you had your hand raised first. If you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Committee Member Nevdal. So I think I heard, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. My apologies. Is it that only final form products qualify for storage? And I apologize if I could get that clarified. It would lead me to whether or not I should ask another question.
Under the current regulatory framework, yes, only products that have been packaged in their final form as they will go to market can utilize the storage only services.
Okay, thank you for that. I do appreciate it. So I think, California is a very large state, and if we're trying to get product in final form from one end of the state to the other, and we have to essentially hub it because we can't make these long drives from the north to the south, it absolutely seems that there must be a pathway by which a product can be hubbed and stored in its final form and then moved to another distribution location or another distribution location farther down the state or in various remote areas throughout the state. So if it's commercial cannabis activity, I guess is the question, in order for that to be required, would there have to be, I guess, does the statutory piece suggest that there would then have to be some sort of, service agreement or specification of that activity and that it occurs on the premise? I guess I'm just a little confused about the hiccup there. So I'm going to just let some other folks comment, but thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdal. Committee Member Bobulian, your hand is raised. If you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, that provided a lot of clarification. And So now here's a couple of things, a couple of thoughts. Maybe allow for the storage only facility to obtain valid testing and COA to be able to move the product along the supply chain without having to send it back to the producer. Also allowing the storage facility to handle packaging and labeling on behalf of the producer, since one of the reasons it's in storage is because the producer didn't have that capability. And granted, this is about moving the product there that's not in final form. This creates an additional business model, more revenues, and is a net benefit to everyone involved. For a lot of producers, this portion of packaging and labeling.
I'm sorry, I lost you there. I lost you after, and granted, it's about moving a product that's not in final form, and then I just did not understand you after that.
Okay, so let me go. Basically, allowing the storage facility to handle the packaging and labeling on behalf of the producer, since one of the reasons it's in storage is because the producer didn't have that capability to begin with. Now, initially, well, granted, the product that goes to storage only currently has to be in final form, but that also takes away from the fact that a lot of the reason why producers want to move their product to a storage only facility is because they don't have the capabilities for packaging and labeling and bringing it to final form. This creates an additional business model. It's more revenues, and it's a net benefit to everyone involved. For a lot of producers, this portion of packaging and labeling and bringing a product to final form is a pretty big expense, and sometimes it's a bigger expense than the actual production of the product. So right now, it's basically taking it in final form, giving it to a distributor to store only for you, which is great, but it really doesn't do much. So I think being able to expand on that and allowing the storage only facilities, think of it in the sense of kind of like a co-packer. I know for social equity businesses, this would be a pretty big benefit also, because right now what a lot of the marketplace is seeing is that people are really great at certain things, such as production, such as branding, such as logistics, and not too many people are good at all of it across the board. So this takes a lot of the burden off of producers, whatever their situation. Most of it is tied to financials. They just don't have the money to invest in the packaging equipment and additional real estate for that storage capability. So I think being able to expand on the capabilities afforded to the storage only license holders would go a really long way in supporting transparency and just streamlining the supply chain.
Hi, this is Tamara Colson again. I just wanted to make one clarification for the panel. So with non-manufactured products, distributors can package those. And the way that would work is when you could send it, your batch, to a distributor for testing and packaging. The storage only provisions come in for when the distributor would store product for another licensee that isn't there for the purposes of the testing process and potentially packaging. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you for that. So what I'm saying would also apply to bulk flower product too, correct?
Thank you, Committee Member Boboyan. Committee Member Cermak, you had your hand raised. If you would like to speak, go ahead and unmute yourself.
We should do everything we can with the regulations as long as track and trace can monitor the flow of goods and prevent diversion. We should do everything we can with our regulations to ease the distribution, thereby reducing the price and thereby helping people compete against the illicit market.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. If there are any additional committee comments, please raise your hand. I am seeing no hands raised, Chair.
So this is Chairman Farrow. I would ask the moderator to open for public comment, noting the hard stop that we're going to have in 13 minutes. So as we approach the 1 o'clock hour, we would suspend public comment and resume after our 30-minute hard stop. Can we do that?
We can. This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I am opening the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type "I would like to make a comment" in the ask field and send to all panelists. Just to reiterate, you will be given 90 seconds with a 30-second warning. I will be paying close attention to the time as we will be stopping at 1 o'clock to have recess and then pick up the comments when we return. With that being said, our first public comment comes from an individual identified as Paul Hansberry. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, this is Susan Tibbin and Paul Hansberry, lovingly and legally, regarding storage. Storage-only facility. It's a good and necessary idea as a new license and should serve as an auxiliary space for the licensee's premises, meaning that distribution or transport could begin at the point of storage. We're looking at interpretation here. Interpretation of statute. The storage-only licensee should be required to have adequate insurance or bonding and should also be able to rescue products to any safe and secure space in the event of an emergency, such as a fire or earthquake. These comments would diminish vehicular traffic as well as duplicative and onerous journeys and fees. Further, it would address needless catastrophic loss in the event of emergency situations. Thanks very much, everyone.
Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as Vera Levitt. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Vera Levitt, COO of Mankind Dispensary. In regards to storage-only services, we're requesting recommendation by the CAC for language addressing some sort of sublease agreement for licensed operators, again, to alleviate the issue of California being such a large state and distributors not being able to get product to Southern California from Northern California and vice versa. We are located in San Diego County. Also requesting verbiage around a stop added to routing in the California track and trace or metric system, as well as clarification on what limited access areas include in storage-only services, whether there are specific physical requirements for that limited access area and how it needs to be secured. One more amendment, perhaps addressing whether the distributor, final distributor, or interim distributor can collect excise tax on behalf of the.
This is the moderator. I do want to make a note to all individuals wishing to make a public comment to please ensure that you are only commenting on the agenda item we are currently on, which is agenda item number 10, currently displayed on your screen. If it is not relevant to this agenda item, I will be asking you to resubmit a comment at the appropriate time. Just as a notation, we do have a agenda item for topics not on the agenda coming up later. With that being stated,
Before you go, moderator, if I may, this is the co-moderator. I just want to clarify that we are taking public comment on agenda item 10A, storage only services. At this time, that is the item that we are receiving public comment on. We will get to B and C later.
Thank you. Our next public comment comes from a Peter H. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, good afternoon. I just wanted to address some clarity. The further processing and packaging is also allowed for bulk manufactured goods to be transported outside of the manufacturer's premise through a distributor to another manufacturer's facility. However, that allowance does not allow a storage facility to hold the manufactured cannabis without an end destination being for further processing packaging. So I would recommend that that's added to the language. The only problematic part of that is there is no language in the BCC or the CDFA regulations dealing with unfinished bulk manufactured goods. So that would have to be added to BCC regulations, that it would only be able to go from storage to another for further processing and packaging. That's the only addition that I'd like to add. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from a Michael Wheeler. Your microphone is unmuted.
Good afternoon, committee. Currently, this is Michael Wheeler with Flowcana. Currently, storage agreements are used by hundreds of distributors to store their tested and retail-ready products at the premise of a second distributor before transporting them on to retail. This is how a supply chain works. Currently, there are roughly 1,000 distribution licenses in California. Each one of these operators with a state-issued distribution license has local authorization and in at least one local jurisdiction to operate as a distributor. But many of these jurisdictions only have authorized a fixed number of distribution licenses to offer to the licensees within their boundaries. And then each licensee only has a fixed amount of warehouse storage space, and they work diligently to optimize the economic use of that space. So with the limited licenses around the state, it is challenging for distributors to exist everywhere.
30 seconds.
The use of storage agreements between distributors in the manner I described is critical for the businesses to address this limitation in licensing. Failure to allow such arrangements would force distributors who do not have their own licenses near retailers to leave stocked distribution vehicles in overnight commercial lots, which nothing in the code prohibits, but it would be a way less secure alternative than to allow distributors to use storage agreements to facilitate last mile distribution. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Lindsay Robinson. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, Lindsay Robinson from CCIA. We would like to make the recommendation to update the testing regulations to allow the transaction of COA tested bulk flower and or leaf material, so long as the receiving distributor obtains a new COA test in accordance with all applicable state and local regulations. Thank you.
So this is the BCC, this is the co-moderator again. I would just like to remind the public that this is taking public comment on storage only services. So agenda item topic 10A.
Again, this is the moderator. If your public comment is off topic, I will be muting you and going on to the next individual. Next individual is identified as Paul Hansberry. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello. Yes, as my partner Susan spoke earlier about auxiliary space for the licensee's premises, this would be taking an interpretation of the word contiguous and allowing the space that would be rented by the licensee, by the producer, to store their products, and it would be an auxiliary to the premises so that they would be able to take things from that storage space and move them forward and not have to backtrack. This has to do with the interpretation of the statute. Currently, the interpretation would say that this goes against statute. I say that it's more of an interpretation of the statute. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment is from Rebecca Stamey White. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. Rebecca Stamey White, Hinman and Carmichael in San Francisco. I'm an attorney who represents many cannabis licensees throughout the state. I've worked with many cannabis clients to set up compliant distribution protocols, and all have struggled with the requirement that deliveries to retailers must originate from the distributor's own licensed premises, especially if they are located in Northern California and trying to get to Southern California or vice versa. My clients want to deliver to their own retailers out of storage, but currently cannot do so. If non-retail licenses were unrestricted and could be issued relatively quickly, the system outlined in 26053D would make sense. But for many licensees, the only option is to store finished products at another distributor's premises, providing services as a hub. Transfers between distributors is permitted under BCC Rule 5307.2.
30 seconds.
Moreover, with the track and trace system, the regulatory priorities can be met. I would propose revising the regulations to permit licensed distributors to pick up products in storage from otherwise licensed premises, even if they are not their own. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Vera Levitt. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you, moderator. I wanted to clarify my previous comment that it is in fact in regards to storage-only services. The request for the Cannabis Advisory Committee to include language around storage-only services for subleasing agreements between distributors, as well as adding a stop to track and trace routing that would engage storage-only services in the track and trace system needs to be within the regulations. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it is 12:59. We do have a comment left. Would you like me to take this final comment or go ahead and?
Let's take that final comment. I believe it's Nolan Maury.
It is. Nolan Maury, your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, my name is Nolan Maury. I work with Herbal Distribution Solutions, and as the comments before we've heard, services is extremely important to our business to be able to provide that for certain business partners, and then also sending product to others for storage-only services on behalf of customers. So I think clarifying the provisions would help us create a more concise framework to have this function. In addition, there are some limitations of the track and trace system of identifying the title owned by which the cannabis goods are held. In addition, 5301B regarding having everything as they package in final retail form, as other people have commented, is a limitation of businesses such as producers and manufacturers who are trying to get their product to a co-packer. I think that should be another thing that needs to be reformed. Thank you.
There are no additional requests for public comments. Would you like me to close this feature?
Please close this feature, and if I can have the co-moderator put us on break until 1:30.